Hi, I'm Annie. I'm an alcoholic. I knew there were some of you here. I want to sort of try to put together a generic 12-step meeting for those poor suffering alcoholics and the people in the sister program with their tiny control issues, and OA people and FA people and any A people. So we're everywhere. And if you want to do something like that, come see me afterwards and we'll see if we can scam a half hour here or there to breathe each other in a meeting. So I really was originally just going to do this writing workshop, which I'm still doing, I think, on Saturday. And then Sharon needed more healing time, and so Raghu asked if I could give a few talks, and that the theme was emptiness and love. And I said, you know, I'm a Christian. We're not heavily invested in either. I mean, we're really about blame and committees and casseroles. And I said I really won't be able to talk about emptiness with any sort of erudition. And although it turns out I almost could. And so then I said, what about if I talk about anything I want? And you could just feel the desperation pouring off of him, and like a flop sweat. And then he said, oh, sure. And you can talk about anything. And then I said, what if I include a little reading? He goes, yeah, no, you can do anything you want. So here I am. So this afternoon I'm going to talk about hope. And have a short reading on hope. And I want to leave a lot of time for questions. I do a lot of events about either writing or faith, and I really feel people come to readings so that they're very nice about the writer insisting on reading the book that they're trying to sell right then, but they really want to ask questions. How do I start? Is it all hopeless? Probably, I usually tell them. And so I want to leave time for questions and answers. So, all right. I know more about emptiness from my life in the recovery movement. Raghu, I found your son. He's right there. Because he had a green shirt on yesterday and it was easy to find him, but he tricked us. So in recovery, if you're an alcoholic or an addict or a person with scary food stuff, overeating or starving or compulsive dieting, or I've had every single disorder you can have. I literally have, except for gambling, because I don't have the heart or the guts for it. I take it really personally if I don't get like a return at a slot machine. I feel ripped off and bitter. And so I don't gamble, I don't have it. But everything else I've had, and one day at a time, in a beloved community, I've had a lot of healing around it. And I'm still kind of wild on some days. And mostly what I want out of this life is to feel more comfortable, and for any pain or discomfort to stop. Whereas the pain and discomfort, the excruciating losses I've had, and that each of you has had by a certain age, have been where I found my way home, where I found my way into truth, into the hardest thing of all, the radical self-love. And I had to do this really deep archaeological work to find myself. I had to do the things I was raised not to do, which was to have feelings. I was raised by the son of Presbyterian missionaries from Tokyo, so you know, God's frozen chosen, which I end up being a Presbyterian too, and a mother from Liverpool, you know, who you didn't do anger or grief You agree, I grew up around alcoholism and black belt codependence. I grew up in a family that was not happy, where the mom and dad really couldn't stand each other. And by about 5 years old, I understood something, a couple things. One was that there's something wrong with me, that I was either defective or annoying, because otherwise, why were they so cold and weird with each other? And I learned also by 5 or 6 that it was my responsibility to help them and to fix them and rescue them and save them. And that has always been what worked for me, was to be the worker bee and to get out my clipboard and listen to people who were in a struggle and come up with a solution. No one mentioned that there was no solution, let alone that a 50-pound person was not in charge of bringing that to scary people. I learned also, what was I going to say? I learned if you had families that were really unhappy or alcoholic or mentally ill or unfaithful, you agree by about 4 years old not to see what's going on, right? Because it just makes them so unhappy if you see it and you say it. So you learn not to. In my family, I grew up in the 50s, very erudite, very cool parents, and we were raised to be who they needed us to be. And I was really good at that. I was very bright, I was very sensitive. I was very sensitive to the point that it was clearly destroying the family, I came to believe. There was a book in the 50s and 60s called The Overly Sensitive Child. And what that meant was that you noticed the suffering, you noticed the sorrow. Women came to our house in the 50s and 60s with bruises, and they had all apparently fallen downstairs or walked into cupboards, right? And you didn't see it, you didn't even notice it, really. And you agreed not to see what was going on because it caused more stress in the family. And there's almost no way to do the radical self-love if you aren't even able to trust that you're a reliable narrator of your own life. If you have to pretend you're never angry or sad, and I had migraines by 5, right? That would have tipped me off if it were my child, that she was a little tenser than the average bear, you know? But no one did psychiatry, no one did therapy, there was no consciousness raising, there was no women's movement. And so it was just, you were just encouraged to fake it and to be who they loved you being. I read all day, every day. I was a great conversationalist, and I had no needs, so that was helpful. When I was coming up, you ate everything on your plate. It would not have occurred to a child in the 50s to say, you know what, I don't actually like peas. I'm not going to eat them tonight. They would, their mouths would have dropped open. They would have bonded over that, you know. They who bonded over nothing, they would have laughed. My mother would have wet herself. If you'd said, you know what, I don't like curry, they would have gone, oh my God, wait, Ken, did you hear that? And what they did was to send you to your room without eating. And coincidentally, I developed a lot of eating disorders. I've weighed 30 pounds less than I weigh now. I've weighed more than 30 pounds less than I weigh right now. I've had every eating disorder you can have, coincidentally, right? Because I associate being a perfect child. And a lot of you who are my age-ish were perfect girls. I know you were. I know you know what I'm talking about. You were perfect girls. You were little flight attendants in the family. And I was a flight attendant. I was the minister. I was my dad's wife. I was my mother's husband. I raised my baby brother, who's 5 years younger than I am. It didn't occur to me ever, until I got sober, or if I was on LSD, that I was perfect as is, that I was part of a great universal song, and that whoever I was exquisite. Didn't cross my mind. The message was, you can do a little better. The message was that I was 35 when I learned that a B+ was a good grade. 35. It hadn't come up. If I got a B+, then the message was, oh, how much harder would it have been to get an A-? But you know the trick, that if you got the A-, the question was there still time to bring it up? So there was no focus on well-being, on being comfortable on your own skin, which for me is well-being and being comfortable in your own skin is really what I think of when I think of enlightenment. I think of when you are in a deep mothering place with yourself of gentleness and absolute forgiveness, you've arrived. I didn't know that it was okay to be angry. Literally, I got sober when I was 32. When I was coming up, an angry woman was a witch. You know, an angry woman was exiled. She was divorced for a cuter, younger, less angry woman, right? It was an exchange, like a PX or something. And it was like if you were angry because your husband was having an affair, or because you'd lost so much that it was hard to imagine being happy again, and it just made you angry and hurt. It was like, get over it, hello, you know, shake it off, right? And there wasn't a little toolbox, like some of us now have these kind of battered little toolboxes with tools in them for dealing with that stuff when that stuff comes up. Because you know what, I don't think this side of the grave I'm going to be free of much, you know, and some days go better than others. And Ramesh and I were talking earlier, you can tell how you are spiritually by how you are in traffic, you know? And you know, if you, in the course of a day, think one person is being an asshole, maybe it is them. If you come upon two, you gotta go look in the mirror, you know? I think this side of the grave, certain things are gonna trigger my shame. I had the shame, I think that's what the migraines are about. I had the shame by 3 or 4 at the most. Toxic shame. I have my Jesuit friend Tom, who I've written about so much, Tom Weston, told me something 30 years ago. I had 2 years sober. He said, here are the rules to be an American grown-up. You must not have anything wrong with you or different about you. You know, you should be the right gender. Sometimes that can't be helped. You should have nothing wrong with you or different about you. Rule 2 is if you do, you should really try to get over it as quickly as possible. Maybe you were dyslexic, not good. Okay, maybe you were not coordinated, not good. Maybe you were the wrong color. Maybe you were an overly sensitive child, ruining the family. Rule 3 is if you can't get over it, you should just pretend that you have. This culture is about helping you pretend that you're actually doing really, really well, and that you can buy it and lease it or date it or have a cool one with dinner. If you can't even pretend to have gotten over it, you should just not show up, because it's very painful for the rest of us. I'm sorry to have to say. And the 5th rule is that if you insist on the right to show up, you should feel ashamed, right? And that's what every single person I've been close to has had to do the healing around. Every single person I've ever worked with who's a writer, we bring the shame, we bring the bad radio station, you know, that we're better than, our story is so trippy and wild and out there, and we're this and we have this, and then out of the left-hand speaker that we're a fraud, and that boy has the well run dry, and talk about beating a dead horse, and Mrs. Wasser in 3rd grade was right, and so you get, you know, little by little you start to get over that shame if your commitment is to the radical self-love, which is where, for me, and any depth of spirituality and freedom has begun. And the 12-step programs are great for that because there are steps that are about emptying it out. And the way we empty it out is we tell someone else. There's a 4th and 5th step where you do an inventory of all the stuff you've done before that has left you feeling just sad and sick about yourself. Stuff you've done where you injure people, or typically where you have fallen really short or of something. God knows what the bar was, but it has to do with your sense of value and the times you gave up your value, anything you believed in, any value, any moral belief you had, just to get high, just to get through the night, just to get that affirmation that you can still get a guy, you know. And when you put it all down, I don't know how it works exactly, but there is a spirit that animates rooms like this and rooms of sobriety and healing in 12-step, where when you tell someone else, it just steals its power away to shame you or make you fearful anymore about who you are. Who you are is how God sees you, but that's always like a second opinion, right? The first opinion is what your parents thought and told you. And so one way of emptying out, I know, is to write it down. And I'll talk more about that with the writing workshop. But there's something between your brain and your hand, something antique and sacred and creative and artistic and trippy about telling the truth on paper. Just saying what is. This is true. This happened. This keeps happening. I just did it the other day. I don't know why that is. St. Paul famously says he can't stop doing the stuff he hates about himself, and he won't do the few things that actually make him feel happy, joyous, and free. Because he's human, right? And it's hard here. And the game of life is hard, and a lot of people, including me, are playing injured. But you write it down on paper, and one thing happens, and you share it with a sister or brother, and another thing happens. And I can tell you that in nearly 33 years of sobriety, I have listened to a lot of people tell me the stuff that was on their list, and I have never once thought, you what? Why would you do that? That's nuts. That's bound to make you feel bad. You know, what I've said is, you know what, me too. I've done that. We've all done that. Every woman I know has done that. Thank you for trusting me. Wow. Bless you. Thank you. Next, what's on the list? And they read it and you say, you know what? I get it. I get it. We try to get self-esteem from anything. And it's an inside job. And I hate that. And I wish I were in charge of more. I wish I were God's West Coast representative. And I would have a much, much more efficient system. But I'm not. So the writing down is one way of emptiness that I know. And the writing down and telling the truth to someone. That's one of the things in my battered little toolbox. It's one of the ways that we let go of the false construct that we were so encouraged to create, partly to keep the family from looking bad. You know, if the children did well enough, the parents looked like they must be doing something right. And partly because it helped us, it protected us. It was armor from the anger and the fear and the shame, the fear that we weren't okay. So, a lot of us, me included, developed this kind of performance art that we wanted people to think was what was the truth of our spiritual identity. And the truth of our spiritual identity is that it's ever changing. And that what it was 10 minutes ago has changed. Because of you, because I'm breathing with you, because I feel very safe right now. I feel very permeable. I am a tide pool right now, which is when I feel not enlightened. I would believe me, I would never, you can ask Neil, I have never used that word once in regards to me. But when I feel well-being and peace and in truth and in the present moment, I feel like I'm a tide pool. and all your love and your kind eyes and all the hugs, all the love, it just washes over me. And you know, it's like Ram Dass used to call this the heart cave in here, but it's more for me like a tide pool. It just washes over me and it sloshes around, and the crabs are kind of tense. You know, you've seen them. They're what the hell? And then the keyhole limpets, you know, and oh my God, and the krill comes, and the tiny fish comes in and it swirls in the water, and then it settles. And then when it washes out of me onto you, it's different water than that which entered. So to be there, though, I rely on that old cliche that we're only as sick as our secrets. And if I share my secrets with you, I'm getting free. I'm getting free one day at a time. So that's one tool, is the truth telling on paper. And another thing is just the noticing. You know, there's one tool I use is AAA, the AAA, the awareness. The awareness that I'm doing my performance art. That as a child I got really addicted to the people pleasing because I just didn't have any confidence that I was the real thing. I was odd. I had migraines. I had this frizzy kinky hair. I had these huge green eyes with big bottom lids, eyelids, which is like not okay. Because of the migraines, I had to lie on the floor of the bathroom in kindergarten, and other people came in. And for those of you, and I know there are a bunch of you here who've had migraines, you need cool. In the 50s, they were St. Joseph's aspirin, but you can't hold anything down, right? So it's like a triple whammy. But if you lie on a cool tile in the bathroom, you're okay again, but then it warms up, and you have to scooch to a cooler tile again, right? And people come in. And so I got this performance art going. Actually, it was fine. It was fine. I wasn't actually having a migraine. I was fine. I just was currently unable to blink, you know, or breathe. And the way to get out of the performance art, to get out of the shame, to get out of the craving for things to be a little bit less uncomfortable, is to become aware of it. And then it's okay. Like if you said to me right now, I just feel, I'm just here and I know I should be feeling, you know, like this cosmicorama, and I'm in my cosmic breath, and I'm in the sacred gaze, and I feel like very anxious, and I feel a lot of sorrow coming up. I wouldn't say, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, just look at all the happiness. You know, I wouldn't do that. I would say, wow, thank you for trusting me. That is amazing. That is beautiful. You told me, and I understand that I'm a pretty anxious person. I just came this way. And I would say, would you like a cup of tea? And I've learned very slowly that the awareness of that leads to the acceptance of that. Then I go, that's really okay. Whatever. I was going to write a book. I might write a book. I wrote a book on the 3 essential prayers called Help, Thanks, Wow. And I thought the 4th essential prayer is whatever. You know? And so it goes awareness that you're doing it, that you're doing something mean right now that you wouldn't do to I wouldn't do to a single person here, and I don't know more than 1 or 2 people's last names. I guess Doss, right? is most people's last name here. So like Linda Doss and Beverly Doss and Ed Doss, but you know, I don't know anyone here, and if you came to me with a fear or a writing related thing, it would be my best self, because that's how my training, my reading, my path, my beloved community have taught me I really am. That's the truth of my spiritual identity. I'm the way that Jesus and my dog look at me, not the way that scared, those parents that I internalize, those critics look at me. So that's another tool of emptying. And then the third part of that is the action. What's the action? I was raised by intellectuals that you break the code and then you'll be happy, joyous, and free. But it turned out, there was no code, and they didn't have a clue. And so I've always tried to figure things out. Well, figure things out is not a good slogan, right? What are you going to figure out? Why you were born a human instead of an inkwell? You know, what are you going to figure out exactly? It's a good question to ask yourself. because I'm a Medicare recipient now, and I have learned at this ripe old age that I'm not going to be figuring much out. But if I want to change the way I feel about someone, I change the way I act towards them. I change the way I treat them. If I have a resentment or a shyness or a fear of them, I just change the way I act. I get them tea. I've tricked various people who have a resentment against me on Neil's side of the family by throwing myself into their arms. It is so subversive. It is the most subversive thing you can do. And I learned that if you take the action, that the insight follows. That we're all a part of the same beloved community. There's really only one of us. And you know what? No matter how holy you are, some days are just too long. And so AAA, awareness of it, the awareness breaks the trance. Another thing that breaks the trance is a rubber band. My older brother, John, went to a smoking cessation program 20 years ago. And you pay like $2,000 and they give you a rubber band. And it's called the spoiler. Because when you're in your addiction, whether it's an addiction to people pleasing or an addiction to cigarettes or alcohol or whatever, the craving tells you that there's one way out. And the only way out is to smoke or to get people to clap for you or to eat your body weight in ice cream, right? But the craving tells you, it's like a voice of, kind of like a voice of God or like a mentor. It tells you there's one way out. But the truth is that the addiction, like a labor contraction, passes scientifically measured in 6 to 7 minutes. And so all these smokers in my brother's program would have a rubber band. And this piece of your body is so delicate right here. And you gently snap it, not like anything that might have been done to you in childhood to hurt you or scare you or dominate you, but just a gentle snap. And if I'm in craving or addiction or fixation, if I'm fixated, which I am sometimes, I put a rubber band on and I snap it so gently and I go, and you breathe again. It's like getting spritzed with a plant mister, And once you're breathing again, you've got the umbilical cord going to the mother, right? You're connected again. So that is one of the tools of and to self-love, the rubber band, the action, the AAA, and that to talk to another person, to tell the truth. To not need them to think you're somebody that you're positive they would like. It's such a gift for them. And why do we do that? When do we do it? We do it when we get sick and tired of being performance artists. We get sick if we're using substances or food or sex and love. We get sick and tired of the hangover. We get sick and tired of the shame. You wake up with alcoholism and you just feel like, God Almighty. And you get to what they always call step 0, which is this has got to stop. This shit has got to stop. I don't have a clue what that might look like. If it's possible for me, I might be too far gone. I might not be far gone enough. And to just think, I don't know, I don't care. It's got to stop. And when we're addicted to the behavioral things, like the people pleasing and the getting pet by other people, getting the affirmation from outside of us, the elevator only goes one way. I love this line. Poor Neil heard me talking like 2 days ago in Dallas, and so he's heard everything I've ever thought, really. And but this guy, when I got sober in the 80s, said that the reason he got sober was that he was deteriorating faster than he could lower his standards. Right? And when you get there spiritually, if you're faking it more, keeping more secrets, doing stuff that you're not bringing forth into the light, may get your attention. It may tug on your sleeve and say, you know what? It's got to stop. None of us, not a person here knows if we meet again next year, who of us will have lived. Not a soul, not the youngest, the very oldest person might be here. And some adorable young person like myself might not. We don't know. So we live as if we've got 1 year left. And you don't have time to not be here in this radical self-love way of life, of healing and becoming medicine for others. Like Rumi says, through love, all pain, all your craziness, all your suffering will turn to medicine. The exact line is, through love, all pain will turn to medicine. Not pain that you think you've brought on yourself, not pain that your parents have never really thought was all that bad. Through love, all pain will turn to medicine. So, if you want to be in the new creation, your new 24 hours starts whenever you decide it does. It's 3:35. So you can think about it, and maybe like 3:40, say to that little kid inside you, and God as you understand God, okay, what? I think, okay, what is a great prayer? Okay, what? What? So, we allow ourselves to be found. Maybe at 3:37, you say to God or to your child or to your spouse that you're going to allow yourself to be found. You've been running around with your butterfly net trying to capture the thing, the person, the station in life that will just do it. And it's not, you can't find it and chase it down, but you can allow yourself to be found. I want to talk about that more when I do the writing thing, because writing is one of the ways we can get found. Dancing is a way we can get found. Creation. Creation is one of the ways we become a new creation. And it's paradoxical because all truth is paradoxical, but it's paradoxical because the creations always start off so badly. You know, really shitty first drafts and clumsy, terrible dancing. I mean, I've taken dance classes where I've actually injured people. And you want to be a new creation? Let's do that together, right now. I asked some people at some of the workshops I did this year to tell one another, just for a couple minutes as an exercise, what it is you have longed to start doing or longed to get back to. You were good at something in high school or college. You were really good at something at 8. Singing? You want to join the choir? You should come to my church. There's 35 people. There's 5 people in the choir. Literally, they will take anybody. You wanted to begin meditation classes. My brother learned to swim at 32, which I thought was one of those heroic things I've ever heard of. But then he said now that he can swim when he goes to barbecue and he swims around for a little while, people go, hey, Steve-O, can you give me a hand with the barbecue? And he hasn't learned how to start barbecues effectively yet. So you really can't win. But there may be something, whether it's starting barbecue or beginning a program of walking every day, or sitting or writing for 45 minutes a day, which is a book. So, you were maybe a good painter, a freshman in high school. People were kids and your teacher loved the stuff you were painting or sculpting. You danced with abandon. And you want to do that again, and you miss it. And there hasn't been time because it wasn't a priority, because there is so much to do. There is so much to do that is completely meaningless BS that we do, and when we're done with that, we try to get one more thing done that we can cross up with, okay? So it starts to argue a wasted life. So just turn to someone, to anyone. You know, one thing I love about just anyone who's near, that's the person who's been assigned to you to hear what you long on your heart to start doing again or to begin doing, okay? So turn to someone, all right? Let's take a breath and turn to someone and tell them what it is, okay? Just a couple minutes. Thank you for trusting me to share your heart's longing with someone who you may have not ever met before. You know, it's just so beautiful to me. I wrote a book last year on hope that was originally called Doom, but the publisher got cold feet. Because everywhere I went, people were feeling freaked out and very alone in it all, and just sad and without hope that we can turn this around, that the uplifting is about to happen, which I promise you it is, because it always is. But it is, and I promise you, we shall overcome. We always have. We are overcomers, and this is a time of incredible energy and uplift. So, but I wanted to put it on paper, and the young people especially were so without hope. I mean, I don't think the UN paper on it's climate science paper helped. You know, we have about 3 weeks. And those of us with grandchildren, I mean, your heart is broken to think of what they inherit. That I'm 20 years, I'm 85, if I'm still here. In 20 years, my little one is only 29. You know, and what is going to be his, well, you know, I was just talking to someone and they said, everything in them is this jungle drum when they're hopeless, when they're in their addiction, when they're in their tripping, their fixation on some bad news or other. It's all like the bad mind of being a scared child. It's like, well, what if? Well, what if? Well, what if? I mean this nicely, but what if he wins a second term? You know, what if the glaciers all begin to, what if this is, but the voice of God and the voice of all the teachers here so far and to come is, what is, wow. The second great prayer is like, wow, whoa, wow, holy cow. And that we move from what is to, wow, what is? What if? I don't know. Well, there's a lot of things we can do. We're doing it. We give money. We march. We listen to people. But anyway, so I wrote a book on hope. And people just felt so defeated. And then, if anyone here is on a limited budget, I can save you the cost of the book by telling you that I wrote a 4 or 5 page piece on hope in the National Geographic that is pretty much a condensation of the book. So I'm going to read it now because, as I told you, Raghu in his desperation said I could do anything I want every time I'm on stage. So this is what I know of hope. And then you would almost have to be nuts to be filled with hope in a world so rife with hunger, hatred, climate change, pollution, and pestilence, let alone the self-destructive or severely annoying behavior of certain people, both famous and just down the hall, none of whom we shall name at this time by name. Yet I have boundless hope. I'm really the most worried person you'll ever lay eyes on. And I have boundless hope most of the time. Hope is a sometimes cranky optimism. It's trust and confidence that those I love will be okay whether they live or not. It's a belief that they will come through whatever life holds in store for them. Hope is the belief that no matter how dire things look or how long rescue or healing takes, modern science, in tandem with people's goodness and caring, will boggle our minds. So like what Bob was talking about this morning. Science in tandem with this rich stream of spirituality and God consciousness on which we bob along. Hope is for me not usually the religious-looking fingers of light slanting through the clouds or the lurid sunrise. It's more a sturdy garment like an old chamois shirt, a reminder that I've been here before in circumstances just as frightening. Bush Cheney, again, I mean that nicely, but I have felt this anxious and scared and stunned before. We all have. All I have to do is stay grounded in the truth. Not always so easy. That's where rubber band comes in. Back in truth. Breath is truth. Breath is the great truth. The breath of the universe, the breath of me into you, your breath onto me right now like a breeze. By showing up with hope to help others, I am guaranteed suddenly that hope is present because I brought it. Then my own hope increases. By creating hope for others, I end up awash in the stuff. Oh, that's very nice, you may well respond. And what does that even mean, the truth? I don't presume to know what capital T truth is, but I do know my truth. And it's this: everyone I know, including me, has lived through devastating times, at least twice, through seemingly unsurvivable loss. And yet we have come through because of the love of our closest people, the weird healing properties of time, random benevolence, and of course our dogs. At regular intervals, life gets a little too lifey for me sometimes. The wider world seems full of bombers, polluters, threats of all kinds. My own small world suffers ruptures, a couple of deaths that I really couldn't bear, a couple of breakups, a young adult who has scared me out of my wits for a couple of years, that leave me struggling to stay on my feet. In these situations, I usually have one of two responses. Either that I am doomed, or that I need to figure out who to blame. That's the Christian thing. And then to correct their behavior so we can all be more relaxed. But neither of this is true. The truth is that through the workings of love, science, precious community, time, and what I would dare to call grace, which is spiritual WD-40, spritzed on the stuck parts and the clench, some elemental shift will occur and we will find we are semi-okay again. And even semi-okay can be a miracle. I meant to tell you that the way that you can find this for free and not have to buy the book is to just Google Anne Lamott National Geographic or National Geographic Anne Lamott, and then you can have this. Semi-okay can be a miracle. You know what I'm talking about. When you are at your most mentally ill, and someone brings you water, someone brings you a cup of tea, someone sits with you, or the plates of the earth shift invisibly, and you're only half as nuts as you were before. It's like, thank you, Lord. Thank you. Thank you. Sometimes I have to believe that heaven is just a new pair of glasses. That was said by a priest who helped establish Alcoholics Anonymous roughly 80 years ago. And when I remember to put on these glasses, I spy reasons for hope on every street. You can't walk a block anymore without seeing recycling bins. Nations are pledging serious action on climate change. My young friend Olivia, who has cystic fibrosis, got into a clinical trial 2 years ago for a newfangled drug, and it's working, meaning she will live a great deal longer than we had ever dared to hope. She's 23. I wrote about her in Traveling Mercies when she was about 1. Back then, not many people saw 23. And she has. She's singing. Her parents rent studio time for her. She's a singer, a writing songwriter. She has a beautiful, beautiful voice, and she has to cough. You know, it's called Life on Life's Terms. There's always a mute button in a studio. And she makes these albums I can turn you on to later, give you her website. I like these days, in spite of our collective fears and grief. I love antibiotics. I'm crazy about electricity. I get to fly on jet airplanes. And in the face of increased climate-related catastrophe, after I pass through the conviction that these are doomed, that we are doomed, that these are end times, I remember what Mr. Rogers' mother always said: in times of disaster and terror, we look to the helpers. That's where we see God. Look to the volunteers and aid organizations clearing away the rubble, giving children vaccines, to planes and trains and ships bringing food to the starving. Look at Desmond Tutu and Malala and Bill Gates and the student activists of Parkland High School, Florida. Anyone committed to public health, teachers, and all those aging hippie folk singer types who galvanized the early work of decontaminating the Hudson River. You could say that river cleanup was child's play compared with the melting of the ice caps, and I would thank you for sharing that, and I would get back to doing what is possible. Those who say it can't be done should get out of the way of those of us who are trying to do it. We take the action: soup kitchens, creek restoration, mentoring, and then the insight follows that by showing up with hope to help others, I'm guaranteed that hope is present. We create goodness in the world, and that gives us hope. We plant bulbs in the cold, stony dark, and the dirt of winter, and our aging arthritic fingers get nicked, but we just do it. And a couple of months later, life blooms as daffodils, paperwhites, tulips. Hope is sometimes a decision that we won't bog down in analysis paralysis. We show up in waders or with our checkbooks. We send money to India and to the Sierra Club, the Union of Concerned Scientists, and to our Uncle Ed's GoFundMe account for his surgery. I wish I had a magic wand and I could make people in power believe in climate science, but I don't. I do, however, have good shoes and a lot of ibuprofen in which to march for science and sanity, and thus blessing. You want hope? In India, you see families waking up on hard, dusty streets, and the poorest moms combing their kids' hair for school. School is hope. Closer to home, you see a teenager recover from a massive brain bleed and head off to college for kids with special needs, not only alive, but carrying a backpack full of books and supplies and lunch. Lunch gives me hope. You saw someone, maybe yourself even, or a child, your child, get and then stay sober against all odds. You read that the number of mountain gorillas in Central Africa has risen consistently over the past few years. One had barely dared to hope, and yet, if this keeps up, we're going to be up to our neck in mountain gorillas. We might hope that this or that will happen and be disappointed. But when we instead have hope in the resilience and power and beauty of the human spirit, in innovation, in God, and laughter and nature, we won't be disappointed. I see people rising up to their highest, most general potential in every direction in which I remember to look. When I remember to look up and around and not at my aching feet, right? The Old Testament says, we raise our eyes, we lift our gaze to the mountains, from where our help comes, from where our hope comes. We lift our gaze. My friend Olivia hates having cystic fibrosis, and every minute of life is a little harder than it is for people without the disease. But most of the time, she's the happiest person I'm going to see on any given day. She is either in gratitude or in the recording studio. The engineer hits the mute button when she needs to cough, which is fairly frequently. She got the terrifying diagnosis 23 years ago, but with the community support, she and her parents kept hoping that she would be somehow okay, or at least okay-ish. Okay-ish is a lot. And then voila, the successful clinical trial of a miracle drug. Children pour out of school labs equipped with the science and passion to help restore estuaries and watersheds. Church groups pitch in to build water wells to nourish developing world villages. As John Lennon said, everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. This has always been true before. We can decide to hope that it will be again. Sometimes hope is a radical act. Sometimes a quietly merciful response. Sometimes it's a second wind, or just an increased awareness of goodness and beauty. Emily Dickinson said that hope causes the goodness to reveal itself. Isn't that beautiful? Maybe you didn't get what you prayed for, but what you got instead was waking to the momentousness of life, the momentousness of the moment, the power of loving hearts, the greatest power there is. You hope to wake up in time to see the dawn, the first light, a technicolor sunrise, but the early morning instead is cloudy with mist. Still, as you linger, the ridge stands majestically black against a milky sky. And if you pay attention, you'll see the setting of the moon that illuminated us all as we slept. And you see a new day dawn. And you see a new day dawn, right? So about 3:37, which is like 21 minutes ago, we entered into the new creation. And that gives me hope. I want to leave lots of times for question, but I want to see if there's anything in the hope talk that I came to give. But it doesn't matter, since I can do anything I want while I'm here. I can just discuss my own personal problems, which are legion. I don't know. Okay, I'll tell you one thing that I think is useful. I think a lot of us have felt like we're in labor. A lot of us, when we were in labor, realized we didn't like children and had changed our minds and didn't really have the time. And I feel a lot of times kind of stuck in that, like I'm halfway through the birth canal, or I'm in a pipe and I'm crawling across it on my elbows and they're getting raw and scraped up. And it's hard to believe that there's anything on the other side. And all that has ever helped me is a couple of people at the end of the pipe saying, I promise you, there's air, there's light, and there's me. And I brought a bag of M&Ms for us to have communion with. So don't give up. My son has "Don't Give Up" tattooed on his forearm. Don't give up. Sober people never give up on anybody who's trying to get sober. Their families may have. They may be hopeless and they may have been to rehab. And you know what we say? Whatever. Sit down, have a seat, honey. How you doing? Did you have a drink yet today? You didn't? Oh my God. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. So another person, for me, is how I find and re-experience the divine spirit, which is who we are and what we're made of and what we're made for. And I'm somebody who has always had 2 or 3 friends that we used to call bosom buddies in the 50s and 60s who were your heart being. And if you have 2 or 3, maybe one is a brother or a sister, maybe you've met one and you are getting that feeling that you're about to meet another one. You have 2 people to whom you can tell anything and to whom you accept anything they are willing to share as being fine. You are rich. You are halfway home. I hope that person is here or reachable by phone. I think that I've had a lot of death in my life, and I've written a lot about death. There's a whole chapter on death in the Hope book. And I believe in the immortality of the soul and the oneness of everything, but I hate when you can't reach a person by phone any longer. And you just long, you just long to hear their voice. At our wedding, one of the priests talked about a book Richard Seltzer, the doctor, wrote about a woman whose husband died suddenly. They were a young couple in their 30s, and she gave his organs for donation, and she couldn't heal year after year. And she finally found the person, the man who had gotten her husband's heart, and she made contact with him. And she asked if she could come meet him. And when they met, he opened his chest for her so she could put her ear against it and hear her husband one more time. I think death has given me as many gifts as childbirth and being a grandma and being beloved on this earth, and yet I hate when you just can't reach them by phone anymore. I do want to say that in protest. I want to file a complaint with the complaints department that doesn't really work for me. And I wish there were a better system. But I want you all to think that I'm incredibly evolved, and I know that death is a portal to eternal life. But I believe that too, because all truth is paradox. All truth. So one thing I want to share, and then if you have questions, I'd really love to answer them. If you don't, I can, believe me, talk till the cows come home. There's a chapter in the book on hate. Because what I was talking about earlier, when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, you get sick and tired of the shame of binging and purging, you get sick and tired of having the secrets around your gambling or drinking or unfaithfulness or whatever. I reached a point, in fact, let me read a little bit of it. I got toxic on my own hatred of the government. And I realized how intoxicating and mood altering the hate was. And I love being right. You know, those nutty Buddhists always say, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And I want to be both. And I believe I am right. And if I had different opinions, they would be probably right too. Right? But at some point you get sick and tired of holding on to that. I got sick and tired of, I can't remember what it's called though, unfortunately. Okay, it's called Don't Let Them Get You to Hate Them, which was something Dr. Martin Luther King said. But I also want to read you one whole chapter, which is called Unplugged, which you will like, I think. Some of the chapters are just a page, such as that 85% cacao chocolate was never meant to be considered an edible, right? I mean, a lot of people fell for it. It's a very good shim, like if you have a wobbly table and you can slide a bar of 85% cacao under, but that's its own chapter. But this chapter is called Unplugged. Almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you, right? I wanted to write down in this book every single thing I could think of that would be helpful to my niece and my grandson, who are young and they're very worried, and it's a very scary time to be a young person. So I want to let them know, unplug, you know, I can't do anything. I can hardly work the toaster, but if you unplug things and plug them back in, they work again. And if you unplug you and take a break and bob and just bob along the stream of God and love and quietness, and then you plug back in, you work again. You're back. So how did we become so filled with hate? This is not who we are. Hate is the worst emotion of all, second only to acute jealousy. Certain special people of late have caused a majority of us to experience derangement. Some of us have developed hunchbacks and ticks in our eyes. Even my Buddhist friends have been feeling despair. And when they go bad, you know the end is nigh. Booker T. Washington said, I shall allow no man to belittle my soul by making me hate him. And this is the most awful thing about it, yet part of me sort of likes it too. For the flush of self-righteousness, the bond to half of the electorate. Who would we be without it? In politics, breakups, custody dispute, hate turns us into them, with a hangover to boot. Hate is such an ugly word, though. How about loathe? How about abhorrence for the noun? Some of my wise, more evolved friends say that loathing certain people, henceforth referred to as them in the paranoid sense, is not worth the effort, that they are too thin as human forms to actually hate. I said, not for me, baby. Others remind us that they are children of God, perfect and precious in the sacred gaze of God's love. Each of them loved as deeply as my young grandson. I say, that's very nice. Then what happened was, I finally got to the point where I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to put down my weapons briefly. Maybe I would end up on the winning side, calmer or at least less deranged. So as is my habit, I asked God for help with the mess of me. One time when my son was 4 or 5 probably, He was horsing it around at a friend's house, and he got his head stuck in the slats of a chair. And he turned around with his head this way, and he said, "I need help with me." And I thought, that is one of the best prayers I've ever heard. So as is my habit, I asked God for help with the mess of me. God immediately sent in two people. The first was Martin Luther King, who quoted on Twitter that hate cannot drive out love, only love can. That sucks. Yet it was enough for me to realize that I needed palliative care. And the second person sent in was an 8-year-old boy. I asked one of my Sunday school kids named Cooper if he believed God was always with him, helping him. He thought about this for a moment, and he replied, maybe 40%. 40%? What if I could reduce my viral load by 40%? Then I'm going to skip ahead. Awareness helped me make progress in my evolution, like going from finger paints to potato prints. I began to hear people who busted me. One morning recently, at the beginning of her sermon, my pastor cited the same Dr. King quotation I'd just come upon, that hate cannot drive out hate, only love can. And I thought, okay, fine, I heard it the first time. Then at the end of the sermon, while wrapping it up, she said, sighing, just don't let them get you to hate them. I have not been the same since. She ruined hate for me. Does anybody have any questions right now? I don't know if we have the microphone, but if you stand up, and maybe we do. I have a caseworker here, Mike, with a mic. And if you had a question, he could give you the mic so that everybody else could hear it. The first one is always really hard to hear, and we can wait, and I can talk. My favorite scripture is, hold on one second, is the Rumi line that through love all pain will turn to medicine. And my second favorite is in Matthew 15, when the Gentile woman begs an exhausted Jesus who just wants to rest and be alone, away from those whiny disciples. She comes upon the exhausted Jesus, and she begs him to come heal her dying daughter. He just wants to rest. And besides, at that point, he thinks that his mission is to save only the chosen people, the people of Yahweh. So he tells her, maybe later, when I've rested and everyone has eaten. She famously replies that even dogs will eat before her people. Under the system, the dogs will eat before her people and her children eat, that the dogs will get the leftovers from the children's table, that the dogs are next in line ahead of the children. And this sassy shiksa talking back to Jesus radicalizes him. He no longer sees his mission of love and healing as exclusive. He gets it. It's Neem Karoli Baba. It's Thomas Merton saying your job is to love everyone, not to figure out if they're worthy of your love. And this might be from today. It's so profound. Jesus insults her in a conventionally racist way, and when she gives him back as good as she's gotten, he all but smites his own forehead. She's right. He needs to heal her child right then because he can. My Jesuit friend Jim Harbaugh says, it's her faith, but you could also correctly say it's her balls. And I love that Jesus loves that in a woman. She has the G-O-D, the gift of desperation. I know that the mystery of grace means that Donald Trump is as loved and beloved as the two brand new babies here, as precious to God, and that whatever he does, is nothing that can ever hurt the truth of who we are. And I see that the gift of desperation that behavior has brought is changing the world as we speak, for the good, for the rising up. I see it all around me. I see it in you. I see it in the student marchers. I see it in our young. I see it in the elderly. Neil is a volunteer at hospice, and these old ladies and men for 15 years since the Iraq War have stood out on the street on Friday nights holding placards for peace. That gives me hope. Yes, what were you going to ask or say?
Hey, my question is about the moments in my life when I move really deeply into hope. They're always kind of followed by this terrible hangover where I then go down into despair, like if it doesn't work out. And so could you just speak a little about that and how you hope without it kind of morphing into attachment?
That's a great question. I could preach that. For me, it's that I get caught up in hoping that this or that happens. And if this or that doesn't happen, which might not be God's will for me or a good thing to happen, I feel disappointment, and I feel that what good is prayer and where is God in all of this? But I think, again, it's like what Mr. Rogers says, is look for the helpers and look to the people who have surrounded you in your disappointment, in your sense of emptiness, and who let you be empty. God willing, the people that are safe for me will let me be empty. Neil said in his wedding vows, if you're hopeless, I'm not going to try to bring you hope. And if you feel helpless, I'm not going to just try to pump you up, but we'll make you an omelet. And so we look to the omelet makers and the peacemakers. But I need to go from hope that, this or that, to hope in that everything is happening exactly as it's supposed to. And it's like those 4 immutable laws that you used to see in the 60s and 70s. The first law is that whoever's there are the right people. Whatever happens, whenever it starts is the right time. Whatever happens is the only thing that could have happened. And the 4th rule is when it's over, it's over. But who's ever there and whatever happens, my hope is that, and my belief is that it's all love, that there's only love, and that people like me, a lot of people who are alcoholics and addicts, have a disease of misperception. And we have the bad pair of glasses on and we're going, what if? And so we put the good glasses on. My hope usually has to do with hoping for somebody that this or that will happen for them, or that they'll have a moment of clarity and realize what a good idea I'm having for them. And but if you have codependence, it's like me. If you were my sick daughter, it would be like I have this rusty fish hook in my chest, and I have connected it to you, and I'm hoping that this will keep you afloat. Because we have a string connecting us, and each have our own rusty tissue embedded in our tissue. And to unhook, and for me to say to you, daughter, your faith has made you whole. I'm not holding you up. Breath is holding you up. Life is holding you up. The Spirit of God is, and for me to help you unhook. And for me to unhook and to say that 4th great prayer, whatever. Let me read you. Oh, Neil, I need my fanny pack. Let me read you a very short Thomas Merton poem, because then you can Google it and then you can have it forever. Because this really helps me when I feel the way you do. If you were here last night, you know that this is the point at which my son begins to overheat and pray and beg God, if there is a God, to stop me. you're young. Oh, you can stretch if you want. It feels so good.
I think it's almost finished. I think it's finished. Okay, more.
It takes a village. Okay, here's the Merton prayer, and if you want it, find a young person, and you can Google it. And I give this to everyone all the time, but this one is for you, my daughter. Okay? My Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I am actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you, God, does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore will I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. So God bless you. Good. So we have hope in this. We have hope in spiritual truth. We have hope that we can find a better pair of glasses. We have hope that the plates of the earth shift moment by moment, and they trend towards the good and the whole and the healing. So I hope that helps. Can I keep this? Oh, no? Is it? Anybody, any other questions? Okay. You'll be sorry. Okay, there's two more. Okay.
Dave, alcoholic.
Hi, Dave.
Thank you for 12-stepping me.
You're welcome.
You talked a little bit in one of your books. You said that in the book of Hope, I guess, you had a chapter on death and on loss. Can you speak a little bit to the process that you found to deal with that and to go beyond that?
Yeah, definitely.
To not get stuck.
Yeah, definitely. Last year the conference theme was about death, and all the young people got really tense, and Duncan Trussell lost his mind. And why is this about death? It's supposed to be about life and love and awakening, but that's what death is about. It's about life and love and awakening. But we're so instructed, especially you look like maybe you're my age, and we were taught that it was scary and it actually wasn't even happening. And I was 6 when my grandfather, who I loved, died, and it was like the big eraser just came and got him. And there was a space where he'd been, and you weren't supposed to bring it up if Grandma was around because it made her too sad. And it wouldn't have occurred to anyone to say, do you want to talk about it? Is that frightening for you? And here's my understanding, or it just didn't come up. Let me just read you a little bit, okay, because I can read it better than I can say it, because I so passionately believe that if you want to become infinitely less afraid about death, that you just have to move right up close to it, as close as you possibly can. Go find some nice dying people You know, there are people in our families are dying. Sometimes we were supposed to pretend they're not, that somebody's aunt's beautician had the same disease and they're fine now, and you say all the endless bullshit that you say, and then, but what if it were you and someone sat down and you had a few weeks, and they said, you want to talk about it? It's supposed to be kind of strange to be facing that after all these years of having kept your fear a secret. You go, really? Because I hate it, I don't agree to it, and I want to self-will it into something, blah, blah, blah. And they'd say, oh, this is wonderful. What else? You know, and so if you can find people who have either faced death and come through and are fully alive and not dying, and I mean, we're all terminal on this bus, but if you found people who've been through it or facing it, or who need you, who need rides, you know what divine love looks like? It doesn't look like light shooting out of your finger. It looks like giving them rides to the lab. It does look like casseroles. I mean, I think Christians have gotten this one thing right. It's generally mortifying to be a Christian, except for the food, really, I like. It looks like showing up. You know, before I turned on Woody Allen, he used to say that 80% of life was showing up. And so many people are so afraid of death that they just stop showing up. And so you show up. You pick up the 200-pound phone that I bet you're familiar with. And you say to the person, do you want some company? Do you want to go for a ride? Do you want to get out of the house? So this is called In the Garden. I'll just skip around it. An elderly friend asked me one day when we wandered through a church garden and it started to rain, what 3 things I would share with her young relative who fears death. As she knows, I fear death mostly as a significant change of address. The first thing I told her is that I have been on hand to help people cross over. Been there for days and weeks and months at the end of a person's life, like everyone actually that I know has by a certain age. And while I would prefer that all deaths be swift and sweet without dementia or pain, every death has been rather beautiful. Second, the more time you spend in the presence of death, the less you fear it. Your life will be greatly enhanced by spending time with dying people, even though you've been taught to avoid doing so. And third, death is not the enemy. Snakes are. And cheese. Snakes and cheese. Cheese is addictive and irresistible. I have had 3 kinds so far today. Anytime you investigate how scary and bad loss is, it becomes a lot less scary and bad. And when it becomes a scary and bad, that's a small miracle. When you can breathe again and you go, oh wow, huh. It's like the 5th great prayer is, huh, instead of the great paradox is that drawing nearer to death will help begin to put it in the rearview mirror. Then instead of living in unconscious fear of its arrival, crashing our nice party, we accept it as one of the musicians, like the old donkey on his way to Bremen to play the lute in the Bremen town musicians. And I promise that the people you lose here on this side of eternity, whom you can no longer call or text, will live again fully, both in your heart and in the world. They will make you smile and talk out loud at the most inappropriate times. You will say hi to them. You will go, oh my God, hi. All as if there's a small crowd watching. Of course their absence will cause lifelong pangs of homesickness, but grief, friends, time, and tears will heal you to some extent. Tears will bathe, baptize, and hydrate you, and the seeds beneath the surface of the ground on which you walk. Sometimes as we get older, death becomes as sacred as birth, and while we don't exactly welcome it, death becomes a friend. It's not what you feared as a child. I hope that helps for now, because it's a long chapter, because let's see. Most of my spiritual breakthroughs have been against my will. I am mortal, impermanent, imperfect, scared, often uptight and even petty. But wow, what a beautiful sunset. Yeah, the Buddha was right about sickness, old age, and death, but check out that moss, that plum. I have not had a near-death experience, but I'm having a near old age one. Failing memory, sore feet, failing vision, stamina, and skin tone. When my grandson asked, "Can I take a shower with you if I promise not to laugh?" I thought, you and me both. Both my parents died way too young of advanced brain disease, of brain cancer and Alzheimer's, so I sometimes get a little worried about my condition. Oh, wait. Let me just read you the very end. When I am sitting next to people who are in the presence of transition, I always tell them, stay as long as you want and fly away whenever you're ready. Sometimes I read these people poetry or scripture, or more often I sit with them in silence. I turn off my phone. It is okay to do that, just as it is okay to stare out the window. Maybe it is not spectacular outside, no sunrise or storm clouds, but maybe the sky has the thin, bright light of mild autumn, is a pretty pale blue with small puffs of white clouds above the ridge of the grassy hillside. Silence is medicine. I mean, that's the theme of this week, is that silence, stillness, quiet are salvation, are God consciousness, are all there is, are the way home. The way home. You may feel overwhelmed with the profundity of the moment or get really bored, and in either case, you'll want to check your text. Whenever you're sitting with a person who's dying, the desperation to check your text will rise and rise and rise. And you know what? We're all the same. We are all the same. There's just one of us. We all want to check our text. That's okay. Many of us do. Maybe try not to check quite so often, though. Nothing much happens at the bedside. Maybe the person's color changes. Maybe they're breathing. When petals of the cactus, as I was writing about chicks and hens that I described in here, when petals of the hen get really old at the base, you know what chicks and hens are? Those succulents, and the hen is really big and impressive and has red piping, and then they're little chicks and they grow, and then they of course become the hens. When petals of the hens get really old at the base, they sag like droopy bloomers, much redder, rust instead of rose, and they eventually drop to the ground to become part of the mulch. This fills me with hope. Their return to the earth, their recirculation. Nothing is wasted. Before we left the garden, my friend and I bent down to touch the papery shroud of a former plant. We grunted and laughed getting up. Ugh, ugh. I guess each of the petals has to become part of the soil so they can feed the plant again. The petals go from these tough, muscular baby belly buttons to big and strong, to fragile, to papery, and then to nourishment. That's the cycle. To papery and then to nourishment, invisible, beneficent, right here. So, was there another question back there? It's okay if there isn't. Yes, in the very back. And up here, yeah.
Thank you. A moment ago, you mentioned God's will. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What you mean by that? As a recovering Christian myself, that kind of gets me stuck.
Oh yeah.
Everything that happens is God's will, the good, bad, the ugly. I just really get stuck with that. So if you could speak a little bit more about that, that would be great.
Okay. My understanding is that God's will is for us to be free and to be realized as the people we were created to be and not the people we agreed to become. And as I said earlier, my will is always to just get out of the discomfort, right? And so I feel like if it's got my will, things get better right away, and then they get worse. Like with digestion, say, or with, they get better right away and then they get worse. And if it's God's will, they're hard at the beginning, hard, and then they get better. And the great 14th century mystic Meister Eckhart said, if the soul could have known God without the world, God would have never created the world. And that for me really explains suffering and mystery. And I know that somehow God's will for me is freedom and to become love. To be love, to give love, to share love, to just be love. Like what's his name? One of the DOS boys. Ramesh. One of the DOS brothers. Like be love now. I believe that's God's will for me. And to be joyous. Wendell Berry, I would get this poem out, but I just so prayed on the front row. It's called The Mad Farmer's Manifesto. And one of the lines in it is, be joyous though you have considered all the circumstances. And I believe God's will is somehow for me to be joyous and to know God. And I think those are the same things. And to be free. And those are the same things. If you could find it, sweetheart, I might read it. Wait, I'll read it to close. That's my understanding. Yeah. And then somebody pointed to someone up here maybe who has a hand up. Yeah. Here comes your worker bee.
Hi, this kind of ties, I guess, hope.
Excuse me 1 second, sweetheart. Yeah. Yeah, Mad Farmers Liberation Front. Okay, yes, I'm back.
I think this ties hope, death, and acceptance together, but I'm not quite sure how. I have a friend who's fighting cancer, and he won't accept death as a possibility. And I understand that because he has to fight this and get through it. But at the same time, by not accepting it, I'm thinking he's maybe missing out on something, and I'm not quite sure how to be there for him or how to reconcile that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, the young man who is also in 12-step recovery, who's one of those sick, suffering alcoholics like myself, would know that not one single person in the history of life has gotten another person sober, right? Were you Joe? Yeah. Not one person has got another person sober. It just doesn't happen. You know, and the more you try, the more they need to resist you. Our help is not helpful often. There's a whole program for people that, like me, who have help disorders, help and tiny control disorders. And I have heard that help is the sunny side of control. And when people that I love are dying, I just want to help them have the easiest time they can and the most peaceful crossing over to whatever awaits us. And I want them to have the richness of the experience. I want them to have richness of the work with hospice and the Desert Fathers and then the poets. And you can't get them to want that. And so all I can do is to to work on my own stuff around the fear of death, and to look at my own stuff about why I want them to die a certain way or to accept it. I mean, for me, I always realize it's just none of my business. It's just none of my business, and I can't fix it or help or rescue or save them or anything, you know? All I can do is work with my own fear of death and check in with them. You want some company? It's not my business to try to get them to die a certain way or to have a lot of enlightenment, which a lot of people do with the advent of hospice. But, you know, you can work on your own faith and faith as death as a friend and death as a opening to the great what is. I know that my understanding of God is that Merton poem, and that your friend is not alone for 1 second. Your friend doesn't know what he or she is doing. I've been with people who were so accepting of death and had like all of us who've agreed to live like we have 1 year left, that you live fully, that you get to another game at AT&T Oracle Park to watch the Giants, that you get to Palomar to maybe see a whale, one more whale, or to rest or to read or to whatever. And I've had an incredibly involved friend, spiritually so evolved, who was 42 with little kids, who died last summer, and she absolutely could not, in the face of weighing maybe 75 pounds, being about my height, believe she was going to die. And she kept shelling money into this faith healer. And I never actually met him, but everyone hated him. I mean that in a positive way. And it was also very expensive. And no one gets anyone else to allow the miracle, to allow it in. So I don't know, all I would do is I would offer myself, you know, in the Christian tradition, we're the bread of God, to be consumed. And I would offer myself as bread. You know, want to go for a ride? One time, want to go out? Can I come over? Can I come get your laundry? That's what divine love looks like, folding laundry. When Sam was an infant, I didn't have any money, and I forgot to get a husband. And I was so overwhelmed. I mean, I was 3 years sober, and it was the hugest, most precious, beautiful gift of my life, and it was so hard. Because all truth is a paradox. And one of the guys from my church, who looks very Amish, he looked old 29 years ago, and he's still alive and singing in the choir. He came up, he was on my door one day when I knocked, and when he knocked and I opened the door, he hadn't called to say he was coming, or he'd called and I hadn't been able to pick up the phone. I mean, if you've had children, you know that all you want to do on any given day is to brush your teeth. If you can get your teeth brushed, you're going to claim victory, right? And at the end of the day, you find your toothbrush with the toothpaste laid on it, and it didn't happen. You know, and you think, oh well, the 6th grade prayer, oh well. And he stood there and he said, if you could ask someone you trusted to do the most awful thing that you need done, what would that be? That is the most Jesus-y thing, literally, that I have ever heard in my life. And I said, I'd have them clean my bathroom. I'd have them clean my bathroom. And he said, all right. And he went down to his car and he got the yellow kitchen gloves and he got the Ajax and he used all of my stuff and he cleaned this toilet and he scrubbed the sink and he scrubbed the mold off the shower. I didn't even have a bathtub, I had a shower, and he scrubbed it clean. So we offer ourselves as bread. You know, I'll tell you one thing, then we should go swimming or something. Let me buy you all dinner later. Right after World War II, when there were tens and tens of thousands of kids without parents who've been separated from their parents. They were rounded up into refugee camps, and it was terrifying after what they had lived through, the bombings and the deaths and the total annihilation of life as they'd known it. And of course they couldn't sleep, and that was a huge problem. They were freaked out and they couldn't sleep. And the volunteers at this one huge refugee settlement discovered that after dinner, at bedtime, if you gave kids a piece of bread to hold, that they could go to sleep. It was called holding bread, because they understood that they would be fed, that someone was there, and there would be bread in the morning. And I think that what you can offer yourself is to be holding bread. You know, for the person inside of them who must be a really scared little kid, holding on to this possibly toxic hope. And so you be bread. You offer yourself. Okay, I think we should all go swimming. I know it's early, but not my problem. What's your code? Okay. I believe God's will is to read more poetry. I teach my young writing students, the 5-year-olds and the 8-year-olds, to write badly, because the world won't teach. The world puts pressure on them to write better and to write well. So I teach writing badly and reading more poetry. So we do that listening exercise I showed you last night, the 15 seconds. And we write badly. For 20 minutes, we write badly. You have to keep the pencil moving on the paper. The sacred sound, the scritch, scritch, scritch of paper having charcoal scribbled onto it. And we read poetry. Poetry holds the answer to a lot of the questions you didn't ask today. So this is one of my favorite poems by the great farmer and activist and Christian. I mean, there are about 8 of us who I'm not mortified by. And it's called Manifesto. So it's Wendell Berry, it's Berry, if you want to look it up later. It's a voice on other people. And it's called Manifesto, the Mad Farmer Liberation Front. Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay. Want more of everything ready-made. Be afraid to know your neighbor and to die. And you will have a window in your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they will call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will let you know. So friends, every day, do something that won't compute. Okay? Every day, do something that won't compute. Love the Lord, love the world, work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Let someone who does not love someone who does not deserve it. It's so hard for me to read, but okay, I'm back. Denounce the government and embrace the flag. Hope to live in that free republic for which it stands. Give your approval to all you cannot understand. Praise ignorance for what man has not encountered, he has not destroyed. Yet, ask the questions that have no answers. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. Say that the leaves are harvested when they have rotted into the ground, into the mold. Call that profit. Prophesy such returns. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. Listen to Carry On. Put your ear close and hear the faint chattering of the songs that are still to come. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Laughter is immeasurable. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. So long as women do not go cheap for power, please women more than men. Ask yourself, will this satisfy a woman satisfied to bear a child? Will this Will this disturb the sleep of a woman near to giving birth? Go with your love to the fields. Lie easy in the shade. Rest your head in her lap. Swear allegiance to what is nighest your thoughts. As soon as the generals and the politicos can predict the motions of your mind, lose it. Leave it as a sign to mark the false trail, the way you didn't go. Be like the fox who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection. Amen, and thank you so much.